Good evening, everybody. Everyone got very quiet all of a sudden. My name is Kathy Young. I'm the new president of Mural College of Art and Design, 6 months in. And I am very delighted, thank you. Really delighted to welcome all of you to Mural. We're very honored to host tonight's important and timely conversation with our esteemed panelists and guests, and we look forward to a great discussion. And I want to thank you all for coming out in this terrible weather. I hope you had a chance to chat, to enjoy the social hour, and maybe to take a walk through our galleries. We just opened our faculty triennial exhibition. It is glorious, so if you didn't have a chance to take a look at it, I hope you'll come back, in fact, many times over the coming months and enjoy the triennial. I think it's appropriate that tonight's session on culture and arts policy is being hosted here at Mural, an art and design college with a long history in Philadelphia, a deep commitment to social justice, and a recognition of the impact that art and artists have on our communities, our cities, and our world. And I want to take a moment, this is the best part of my job as president, to talk a little bit about Mural. I know that many of you here know us well, but some folks might not. From its inception, Mural's mission has been to elevate underrepresented voices in art and design, to empower our students as leaders, and to prepare them for lifelong careers. We were founded 174 years ago as the only all-women's art and design college in the US, and 2 years ago, we shifted our admissions policy to admit students who identify as non-binary and gender non-conforming. Our student body now is actually among the most diverse of US independent art and design colleges, not only in terms of gender identity, but also racial identity and neurodiversity. As artists, our students bring unique capacities to leadership, imagination, curiosity, creativity, and they come to Mural not only for what we offer them, but also for the great classroom of the vibrant city of Philadelphia. Our students care deeply about the world around them, and they're committed to utilizing their art as a force for change. We were actually honored this fall to be selected as one of the most civically engaged campuses in Pennsylvania due to our high student voter turnout. And our students eagerly connect to the Philadelphia community through service learning, internships, student teaching, and other opportunities. So all of this is to say, here at Mural, we are incubating the next generation of artists, educators, and arts and culture leaders for Philadelphia and beyond, and we could not be more pleased to host tonight's important conversation. Thank you, and now I'd like to introduce my colleague, who you will all know, I'm sure, Daniel Tucker.
Thanks for that welcome, Kathy. Really glad that you're here at Mural and helping us contextualize this work that we're doing here together. And thanks to all of you for being here so we could do it together. Also, a few other thank yous for the evening to some folks that make this kind of program possible. Thanks to our new Dean, Claudine Thomas, who is here. Thanks to Lauren Stichter, to Zach Burden in admissions, Claire Devlin on the AV front, Brian Caputo from facilities, and our whole team from marketing and communications who helped us produce this event. And also thanks to Jane Golden and Amy O, who works with Jane at Mural Arts for her extra help on outreach for the program. So if this conversation is appealing to you, we hope that you'll stay in touch with us at Mural. These are the kinds of things we love hosting, and it's a way for us to also engage our colleagues and be citizens of the city. My collaborator on this event in particular is Lauren Stichter, who runs our art education program here at Mural and has a lot of forums specifically for art education. And I know that she was able to invite a lot of folks from the Pennsylvania Art Educator or the Philadelphia Art Teachers Alliance tonight, and just appreciate her doing that work and encourage you to stay in touch with her if you want to learn more about those kind of programs for art educators. She's there in the back. And so I just want to say a little bit about the framing and format of the event, and then I'll get out of the way. So as far as framing, from where I sit teaching socially engaged art classes here at Moore, we're often talking about the socially engaged content or subject matter of the artwork or programs that our students are developing. But tonight we turn the lens more on social and civic engagement through the arts. And so we're going to hear a little bit about our speakers' journey into arts and cultural policy work, but we're also going to hear about the stakes and possibilities for Philadelphia as arts and culture organizations consider how to participate in the election of a new mayor. And so we'll weave through, kind of a exciting range of topics and context and reference points that our esteemed panel, will introduce for us. And as far as a format, we're going to have a moderated discussion between our three speakers and with a moderator, and then we'll open it up to questions during the last half hour before we wrap at 8 o'clock. I know there's a lot of brilliance and experience here in the room, so look forward to hearing from you all. I'll just share a little bit about our speakers, and then as I welcome them to the stage. So our moderator tonight is Linda Earle, whose most recent work was developing Tyler School of Art's new arts management track within their MA in art history degree. She previously served as a senior program director at the New York State Council for the Arts. Then I'd like to welcome up Patricia Wilson Aden, who's the president and CEO of the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. Prior to that role, Aden served as the president and CEO of the African American Museum in Philadelphia. Jason Schupbach is the dean of the Westfall College of Media Arts and Design at Drexel University, and previously he was the director of design and creative placemaking programs for the National Endowment for the Arts. And finally, but last but not least, Jane Golden is the executive director and has been the driving force of Mural Arts Philadelphia since its inception, overseeing its growth from a small city agency into the nation's largest public art program. So I'd like to welcome these four incredible folks up to the stage to help us work through this, these questions with them. So thanks for being here. Yeah.
Well, good evening, everyone, and I want to thank Daniel and Lauren for bringing us together in conversation. I'm very excited about tonight. And I'm going to be moderating very lightly because these people are so brilliant and have so much to say. So I'm just going to begin with a couple of questions. They'll have questions for each other, and you'll have questions for them. We really want to make this a conversation. So my first question is, you all come to this with a passion for art and its intersection with civic life, but you come from different directions. You've been administrators, artists, designer, educators. What is it about your specific experience that formed your relationship and your engagement in cultural policy? Patty, can we start with you?
She looked at me first. I will take it on. You mentioned a couple of words that I think sort of defines my approach. I started my work in historic preservation, but very early on I considered myself an activist, but didn't really know how to harness that passion. So had to learn and continue to learn about how policy can be used to reach the ends that we as arts activists are all shooting for. Lessons such as making sure that our policy is informed and influenced by the coalitions that we build. Those coalitions, especially in a sector as diverse as ours, is very important to demonstrating the depth of support to elected officials and other key decision makers. as I continue my work beyond historic preservation into working with culturally specific organizations, understanding that policy has to be examined through the lens of equity, that we have to speak with authentic voices as we are talking to those key decision makers, also factored into my approach to influencing policy. And then in my work right now with the Cultural Alliance, understanding that influencing policy is a marathon. It is not a sprint. The work that the Cultural Alliance has been undertaking to influence city-level policy has been ongoing since the organization's inception, but over the last 3 years especially, and I'm especially proud of our track record over the last year, we have been continuing to push our elected officials to understand the needs of the cultural community for funding, the needs of the cultural community to be taken seriously, to be lifted out of that elitist perception and to understand our social impact. We have to create impactful narratives if we are to influence policy. So it continues to evolve, it continues to grow as I continue to grow in my career.
That was great. Thank you. Okay, so I was like an artist who wanted to be a lawyer, and I ended up getting this job at the Anti-Graffiti Network, which was like the best thing that could have happened to me. And so I spent 10 years working with block captains and community leaders and graffiti writers, lots of them. And it was like amazing because it was like we were working on the ground, but you could see how you could leverage support from the city and you could actually create changes, and that those changes could happen around the creation of beauty and art. And so it was like an early indicator of what art could do. And then we realized, because we were like this little coalition, me, the graffiti writers, the block captains, that we actually, as city employees, that we could reach out to commissioners and deputy commissioners and people in the mayor's office and sort of use our little bit of power for good and bring people to neighborhoods, talk about changes that everyone wanted, and not center ourselves, but make sure that we really valued the authorship of citizens across the city. And there was something really wonderful and magical about that. And so we kept mining it, and we kept sort of building this sort of movement around art making. And we started to see things change. Like, what do I mean change? We started to see big departments start to recognize the value that art had. But then what about policy? What was firmly rooted in the ground? And there wasn't anything there, but you did feel something almost that you couldn't really state explicitly. You felt like the magic of art at work was like a heart beating. And then when we became Mural Arts, we were just a little organization, right? We were just 5 of us. But we got it. It's like, okay, we have autonomy, and now we have support from we had this new boss, Commissioner Michael DeBerardinis, and we were in the recreation department. And so we thought, okay, so we're going to take our newfound freedom as not an anti-graffiti organization, but a pro-art organization, and run and hire like lots of artists, emerging artists, established artists, work with young people. And so we started to realize that if you work on the ground, you have to keep your eye on the people that create policy, and you can't let them off the hook. And you have to be absolutely relentless and tenacious and tireless and just go, 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 go. And if you did that, things could change. Not a lot. It's slow. You're right. It's incremental. Like my first boss said when he came into the recreation department, he wanted a revolution and he had to make do with an evolution. Like, I get that working in the city of Philadelphia, but always aspire for the revolution. Hold on to that. So then what happened is John Street became mayor, and we were made part of the Division of Social Services. And suddenly me, low on the food chain, Jane Golden, I'm suddenly at the table with commissioners who have real budgets and vision and creativity. So it was our assignment as the Little Mural Arts Program to infiltrate ourselves into the lives of all these people. They didn't really know it. We followed them down in the elevator, across the street. I would hang out around the fax machine, just say, hey, how's it going? Thinking about art today? Ta-da! So like we would do this and we would sort of be relentless. And then we started working in prisons and social service agencies and the Juvenile Justice Service Center. And everywhere we went, we were like, wait a minute, we want to influence policy. We want it to be non-negotiable. We want people to support the arts. And then as mural arts grew, it was like, you know what? Artists have power. They are extraordinary. And my colleagues across the city, some of whom are here tonight, who run nonprofit arts organizations, my two colleagues here, they are incredible people. Why does the fifth largest city in the country not recognize this? And what can we do as this public art making engine do to support people across the board? And again, just keep our eye on the ball. What do we want? We want government to support the arts. We want more support from the private sector. This is what we want. And I realize that I am an absolute pest. I know that. I am like neurotic, sort of, but I don't care. Like, I really don't care because I realize that that is how change is going to happen. So my love and interest of policy and government, this whole experience of working for the city of Philadelphia, 5 mayors, it has been like an incredible, like getting 5 graduates degrees and how you work with neighborhoods, how you work with communities, and how you can get people who have power to do the right thing on behalf of the arts.
Activist spirit, yeah.
You said so many powerful things. Artists have power, be tenacious. I mean, I don't even know how I can follow that up. I'm relatively new to Philly. I have to start by saying, go Birds. Sorry.
You have to say.
I have to say that. I just like to be accepted here. I think I'm sitting here because I worked at the national level, and my personal journey came from a real passion for the arts my whole life, but kind of realizing I'm not a very good artist. Like, you know, you have that moment, you're like, I'm never going to be Beyonce. That was my personal journey. But I was like, how do I create the space for these people to be successful, like, and to give artists power and to use the tools and systems and policies of government to create the space for artists to do the work that they need to do in our communities. And I've done that at the local, state, and federal level. And I thought it might be useful for the people that don't know to maybe frame just a little bit how some of those policy systems work. I mean, can I nerd out on government stuff for 2 seconds? Like, how exciting is this going to be? You came out to hear about the government, you know? So who knows what the National Endowment for the Arts is? Okay, so what is it? What is it? It gives grants out, but what actually is it? It's a federal agency. Wow, that's the first time someone's got it on one of the first tries. So people think it's an endowment. It's not an endowment. It's a federal agency that gets money in the federal government every year to give out to artists. It's one of 60 agencies that supports culture in the United States. Federal agencies, we have a very dispersed system in the United States. So there's like the Endowment for the Humanities, the agency no one knows about, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which has a budget, by the way, 6 times the size of the endowments. There's the Kennedy Center, which you've heard of, or NPR and PBS. These are some of the agencies that support art and design. The NEA, which I think is a relative agency for us to talk about here tonight, 40% of its money automatically goes out to the states to support something called the State Arts Agencies, which in Pennsylvania is called the what? Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, right? In some states, it's called totally different things. The states have to match that money. So automatically the federal money, 40% of the federal money is matched. Many states like Pennsylvania match it even more. And then there's city and local agencies that set policy. I don't think this is a space that we should be proud of in Philadelphia. I think our city is very much behind, I'm just gonna be honest, in funding culture and also in innovative policy compared to other cities. And I think that's something we should try to own and improve, which we're gonna talk about tonight. And then there's something called the Regional Arts Agencies, which also get some federal money. Ours is the Mid-Atlantic Arts Alliance, and those were nonprofits set up in the 70s so that the federal government and foundations could park money at a nonprofit and could do things that federal agencies couldn't do. And that is the general system of support for the arts in the United States from the government side, if that's helpful to hear. So I mean, my personal journey has been working in a lot of those spaces, and when I joined the NEA, who remembers what happened in 2008? What happened in 2008? Yeah, the economy like fell apart. So we were all like running around going, what do we do? And all federal agencies were asked, what are you going to do to help with the economy? And so the arts agency was also asked to do that. And we created this whole thing called creative placemaking. And I know the term is somewhat troubled, but it was basically an effort to say artists have a role. Everything Jane said. I mean, Jane has been doing creative placemaking for a bazillion years. And I, bow down to you. But it was this huge effort to say, not only do we need to have policies that support artists and culture works and their role in the city, but artists have a role in all of the other agencies and all the other policies that are going to be happening. It's kind of a dual-headed beast in that way. And we were this rinky-dink agency with, we used to call our budget dust. It was like, we're $200 million a year. It's federal budget is trillions, but we would be like, how do we get our stuff into their stuff? So we would go to HUD, Housing and Urban Development, we'd go to Transit and be like, our policies matter, we matter to you. And some of that work is continuing today, and happy to talk about it. But so I think that's one way we can have this conversation tonight, is how do we have an agency at the city level that serves us better, but how do we also empower that agency to empower all of us to be present in the other issues that are pressing the city right now? Like, things are messed up in Philly in a lot of ways. We have so much to be proud of, which Philly doesn't ever say enough, but we also have a lot of things to work on.
You all mention a couple of things in common, is that your work has been about creating narratives, creating countering narratives that, and sort of redirecting narratives, and also creating community. And so the question is, what tools do advocates need, and how do you spark advocacy?
How do you spark advocacy? You highlight what is precious, you highlight the treasures, but you also change the narrative. Here in Philadelphia, for the longest time, the narrative has been save the arts. The truth is, the narrative is more befittingly, how can the arts help save this city? The arts is an asset, and we need to promote ourselves as an asset. The tools to do that run the gamut, because our strategies have to be diverse, because we have to touch a lot of people. Wide communication through effective social media. We are about to launch hashtag Arts Mayor for Philly. We want an Arts Mayor for Philly. So we are going to be putting out that hashtag, and hopefully we will generate support that way. We want to have social media campaigns that make sure that the buzz is out there. We have to also engage the candidates. So we'll be having a mayoral forum March 30th. Everybody mark your calendars. The arts community will be inviting those candidates, the 9 candidates that we have, to Taller Puerto Riqueño, to have a forum where we will ask them about their arts policies. And we will hold them accountable, because we want to hear back from them. Arts Voter Guide, that tool that will help inform those people who care about art, so that they make informed decisions when they do cast their votes. There is an array of tools out there that are absolutely necessary. The Cultural Alliance is about the business of rolling out those tools, but at its core, it's engaging people's hearts and minds around art, and the fact that it is something that contributes to the well-being of our residents. It's an economic engine. It is something that touches every aspect of our lives, and it is not an elitist afterthought. It is something that impacts the lives of our children in a very, very positive way, offering alternatives to some of the pathological behavior that we see out there. So as arts activists, as arts administrators, we have to have a very bountiful kit bag of tools that we can use, because our job is hard. This is a tough job, and we welcome any additional tools that are out there. The one most fundamental tool is our voice, your voice, every individual's voice. That's basic. We are all carrying the narrative, carrying the passion with us.
Yeah, I think the good news from the last 20 years of work on a lot of the arts and place-based work is that the narratives, the stories of how this works on a lot of the big issues is out there, right? Like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The what other communities care about, like, if let's take public safety. Who thinks public safety is an issue in American cities right now? There's an enormous amount of research and study on how to talk about people who care about public safety and the role of artists in it, right? Mm-hmm. The measures that police forces look at and other public safety community members look at to measure how we're doing on that issue. How to talk about, like, the narratives exist, the tools exist out there for us to be able to use. It's about how do we use them in the right way to convince, especially the mayoral candidates, to prioritize this. I mean, we used to always say, you know, to build a great city, you need like 100 tools at once, right? There's no silver bullet. I'm sorry to use a violent metaphor. You kind of need silver buckshot. I used to live in Arizona. Sorry, we'd say things like this. And there's 10 to 12 of those 100 tools are arts-based tools. And why are you not using all the tools in your toolkit? You're being foolish. You're not using everything you could use to solve some of these city problems. And I feel like there's so much out there that we could be using to make this case, and we just need to embrace it and go for it. So.
And I think we can also look at history. So think about the Works Progress Administration and when the federal government really infused lots of money into the life of this country. And so many artists and playwrights, writers, musicians got their start. It was unbelievable. And then fast forward to when I was coming up, there was something called CETA, C-E-T-A. And all these artists were working. That's how I did murals in LA. Like, there was all this money to do public works. And then the Anti-Graffiti Network. Wilson Good put $6 million on the table. What was that money for? Like, people go, oh, Anti-Graffiti was like some fascist, horrible organization. Actually, it was youth development, to be honest with you. Mostly we employed, in the summer, 3,000, 4,000 young people. You want to know what to do to combat violence? Let's put a lot of money on the table and provide young people with jobs where they're paid well. What about that? We don't have enough rec centers to fix up? Yes, we do. So, I mean, I think we just have to look at models over time and even, and more currently, that work. And I also want to say that, see, I think, having worked for 5 mayors, that I want to say that I have seen times when people in the cultural sector have really galvanized. And that really matters. Like, numbers count. So everybody everywhere has to be involved. That's the thing. And it makes a difference because, you know what? Because I've seen money go here, go there. And so when mayors say, oh, I'm sorry, there's just not enough money for this, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. It's about decisions. It's about choice. A budget is a moral document, and don't let anyone tell you anything differently. The money is there. Who is going to make that decision? And we, as citizens, need to influence, just like when Michael Nutter was running, that whole group was running, the cultural sector got behind him. And they got behind him with fundraisers, with people, artists. I went to fundraisers. I went to events where there were a lot of people there, and I never really seen that before. So in Boston, there are cities in this country where people have gotten someone elected, but it can't be a few of us. It's got to be a lot of us, and that matters. And our sector needs not to be divided. We have to speak with a cohesive voice if we want to make progress. You're going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think Patty has a ton to say about this too, but I want to just make 2 points. One, we have got to get out of a deficit mindset into an asset mindset. There has never been more money in our society. I don't want to ever hear there's no money. The federal government is gushering money out of it right now in a way that has not happened in 60 years. Cities and states have more money than they've ever had. Philanthropies are giving out more money than they've ever had. Don't tell me there's not the money. It's about the advocacy. And the other thing I'd just say, just to add to everything you said, is the worst thing we could have is apathy, right? You have to show up, because if you're not showing up, somebody else who wants money is going to show up and make their case. So.
I'm a witness to that. That's true.
Now, I do want to say something about this unified voice, because for too long, the arts community has been perceived as divided, disorganized, scattered, and fighting amongst ourselves. We cannot afford, at this point, to speak in any other way but with a united voice, really elevating our priorities and really making the case that art matters. It makes a difference in kids' lives. It makes a difference to our neighborhoods. It makes a difference to the image of this city. And so that unified voice is something that I will charge each and every one of you here in this audience to be part of this loud, clear, clarion call for unity within the arts community.
It might be useful for us to talk a little bit about what we don't have in Philly compared to some other cities. I mean, Patty, you've done some analysis of that.
Well, what we don't have in this city is dedicated funding. And if you look across the landscape of the country, there are cities that have made that commitment to dedicated funding beyond the funding of a small Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. It is understood, as Jane said, that an integrated plan where arts is seen and part of every single department. Art is part of the strategy of commercial development. Art is part of the strategy in public safety. Art is part of the strategy when we're dealing with children and families. That integrated plan is something that we have seen again and again in other cities, and we deserve here in Philadelphia. So yes, there are models elsewhere for dedicated funding. There are models elsewhere for integrated plans. We do not have to invent the wheel. We have to, I think, embrace the innovative, tested and tried strategies from elsewhere and make them uniquely Philadelphia.
And I just have to say this before I forget. So the other thing with our mindset is that we have to get over this. Like I've like testified in front of city council sometimes, and like people like about preservation of public art, and they're like, well, we can't do that, Ms. Golden, because we have to support education, we have to support public safety, we can't support the arts. What? Do we aspire to be a global city or not? Stop it. Stop saying it if we're not going to do it. If we want that, then we have to multitask. Like, what is the problem? We can have the arts and have these other things. In fact, if you center the arts, like if I were mayor, what I would do, well, never mind, that's a long list.
Yeah, there we go.
But like seriously, like have art in every department. Like other cities do that.
They did this in Boston recently.
But that's a mindset that we just need to get over. We can do it all.
I think we need to stand in our power.
Yes.
We are a $3.4 billion industry here in Philadelphia. We contribute to the economy of this city, the well-being of this city in so many ways. But we as a cultural sector are often apologetic. We at the cultural sector are often waiting to be invited to the table. Well, when you're a $3.4 billion industry, you stand at the table and you declare that you have impact and import. So I think it's a change in attitude here in Philadelphia that's required, that we do stand in our power. They stood in their power in Boston and made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about that real quick.
Ask a question about unifying the arts community, because it is, the fact is it is hierarchical. That's some of it is based on the prize-based philanthropy, and structured almost that way. So when we're talking about advocacy, and this is so key to the strategies you're describing, how do we unify the arts community? How do we need to start talking to each other?
Because I think it's not a zero-sum game. I think the truth is, if there's more money, right? And so, like, I know that there are candidates who've run and they say, oh, what should we do? And I'm like, well, number one, quadruple the cultural fund. Like number two, like right away, like you can do things that will help everybody. And I feel, and I've always felt really strongly about this at Mural Arts, and some of my colleagues from Mural Arts are here tonight, like it's really important that we hire as many artists as possible. Now we're doing more regranting. We're trying to get money out the door fast. So like we all can help each other and support each other. And I don't think that's some corny narrative. I actually think it can happen. And if we sort of see ourselves, okay, we're in this together as a sector, rather than, you know what? You get city money, I want city money. Like, stop it. Why don't we all get city money? And that is not a dream. That could be a reality, because it's a reality in cities far smaller than Philadelphia.
And I think that what everybody wants to stop successful advocacy is for people to eat each other's lunch and to start pointing fingers at each other. So and I think just from an outside perspective on Philly, and I've said this in several meetings I've been in, you guys are legendary for your diverse set of organizations at many different finance levels and many different kinds of service. I mean, we used to say at the NEA, like, oh my God, they have so many incredible things there. They have the Village, they have Asian Arts Initiative, they've got everything, all different sides, the Barnes, all these organizations. What an incredible cultural richness. I mean, some of these organizations are nationally known for setting and inspiring policy in other cities. I mean, all of creative placemaking emerged from the Village of Arts and Humanities. I mean, it's the organization that we would talk about. I can say I was in the rooms as we were writing the policy, and I was saying, Lily Ye did this first. I mean, and we don't own it. We act like we're some kind of second-class city, and that's insane to me. And so I think that the more we can own our power, like you said, and own the fact that we do this and do this really well and deserve to not only have money to support it, but really innovative policies. Like what happened in Boston is Marty Walsh, who's now the head of labor and I think might be the new chief of staff for Biden. The whole cultural community came together to get him elected. His chief of staff was an arts person. Yeah. And it's not just the mayor that matters. It's who gets assigned into those agencies, right? And they made sure that every single one of the arts community had a list they gave to the mayor and said, these are the people we think would be great in transit. These are the people we think would be great in housing. They get us. Yeah. And then they made the cultural agency person a cabinet level position. And so that person was in the room for all the big decisions. And this is the policy nerd stuff you got to pay attention to. But if you're not showing up with a list about who you think is going to be great, you don't have those suggestions. I mean, how do you get in the room? You got to be in that room. And they were able to like triple their budget. They have all these interesting policies going on. And that was a place that was worse than Philly is right now. I mean, it was really bad. But this can be done. This happened in the last...
There's like 5 things. There are 5 tangible things. I mean, we all have it memorized that somebody could do immediately. And then they should say, I mean, if it were me, I'd say, hold me accountable in 6 months. Hold me accountable in a year. I'm only as good as my word. And this is exactly what I'm going to do.
Say one quick thing about Massachusetts. That same community got together, and for the new governor, Maura Healey, she is going to put in a cultural cabinet minister for the state for the first time ever because they advocated for it.
So let's enumerate those things that we all know. Let's enumerate those things because we have been having this conversation amongst ourselves. We need to put it out there. Number one, and I shouldn't say number one because we don't want to rank these things because they're all equally important. We need that dedicated funding. We need to have the surety that from one year to the next, arts and culture will be funded at a consistent level. We also need that department level position. We want to ensure that when the decisions are made, there's someone representing arts and culture at the table, influencing their peers of other cabinet level positions, but also ensuring that the third thing, the integrated arts plan, is getting enacted. There's also another thing that we want to talk about some more, and I don't think we've talked about it enough. We want to ensure that Philadelphia is a city with policies that support creative workers. We need creative workers to be able to thrive. Moore College, Tyler, Drexel, we have this density of wonderful secondary arts institutions. We are incubators for the nation's arts talent. And what we need to do is hold on to that talent, retain the talent. What policies and strategies need to be put in place so that creative workers can live and thrive in Philadelphia? It's about subsidizing live workspaces. It's about making sure that those people who work in a gig economy can survive here in Philadelphia. It's about making sure that as we look at commercial revitalization strategies, there's an art strategy as part of it. There are plenty of things that we can talk about, but having those regulations and policies in place flows from having that integrated arts policy, flows from having that cabinet level position, and have thriving arts institutions where those creative workers can work and create. That's the other thing that we need as well.
And that has to be non-negotiable, honestly. Mm-hmm. The fact that we're still talking about, I went through, just as for fun, like all the policy papers that I've written. I can't believe it. And not just me, but my colleagues, since John Street was mayor, it was like, I think the first document was dated something 2000. And it was like, for all these years, the same thing. It was asking for the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, Would you do that with any other department? No, it's sort of like the things Patty just laid out. It's just common sense.
Yeah. I remember at NISCA, the Council on the Arts never met with economic development. And we considered ourselves part of, at least part of that. It wasn't integrated. The approach wasn't integrated, and we stood alone. And so when the culture war happened, it all focused on arts grants, and it's not only grants aren't policy; they're a product of policy, right? I wondered if you had questions to ask each other.
I want to say one more thing.
Okay, sure. No.
So we've been concentrating a lot on the mayoral election, but let's be smart about this. We need to pay attention to council as well. And the fact is that we've had a number of council members resign to run for mayor. Many of them were friends of arts and culture. We have new council members on board now, and who finally passes the budget here in Philadelphia? It's council. So as much as we want to be active advocates at the mayoral level, let's keep our eye on city council as well. We cannot be Johnny One Note. We have to make sure that we are talking to all of the key decision makers. And here in Philadelphia, it is not only the mayor, it is council. And there are other folks that we need to engage as well at the state level. But let's make sure that as we fire up this advocacy engine, that we are really very specific and knowledgeable about how we engage our council members as well as the mayor.
And I also want to just underscore what Jason said, because I thought that was a really good point about and thank you, that was great, a good point as well, Patty, about council. But also, you want someone, whoever becomes mayor, who they hire is absolutely critical. It's got to be somebody who is not intimidated by smart people, competent people. There have been mayors when you could go in and, like, I'm a highly transactional person, and boom, go in and you could make something happen, right? And then there are times when you can go in with all the will and energy and everything, and it's like nothing. It just falls flat, and you're like, ugh, you know what I mean? So it's like, who is it who's going to hire great people, inspiring people with passion, who will love the arts too, as well.
Who have the language and the energy and the data.
Yeah, so it's like an ecosystem we have to think about. You're absolutely right. We can't just think in a singular way, but who's going to create an administration that's really going to be able to move the needle, and then council is critical as well.
And holding them accountable is critical.
Yes.
We've had forums before, we've had discussions before, and I've seen candidates stand up and say, well, I played the violin in 4th grade. That is not arts policy. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's
I won
this.
a poster contest.
We ran into this all the time at the feds. It would be because I worked with a lot of mayors. We did a lot of stuff with a lot of governments. There's two things that you get in response to the arts a lot. One, that it's elitist, and I'd always say, well, do you sing in church, or your temple, or your mosque? Do you dance in your home? Well, then it's not elitist, right? Do you like to listen to music? And then the other thing you get is it's that nice to have thing over here, and it doesn't have sophisticated policy around it. We have 40 years of housing, 50 years of housing policy, and this blah blah blah. And I'd be like, well, we actually have 50 years of arts policy because we're sort of there's this general lack of understanding in a lot of other government agencies and a lot of the mayor systems, and this has gotten better actually over the last 10 years, that there are real serious policies here that have real impact and real effect beyond just asking for money to support a nonprofit, right? And so, and I think that because of when I started a lot of the creative placemaking work, you could put the number of articles and books and policy papers on one shelf, right? That was 20 years ago. I mean, there's libraries you can fill with this work now. I mean, there's just been it's a part of government policy that has continually gotten a ton more sophisticated in this country. And I think that we're kind of waiting for governments to catch up in a lot of ways. So I mean, there's just so much to pull on, but you get this knee jerk, and we'll probably get this in some of the mayor's forum. I mean, I don't know these candidates, but you're going to get that kind of answer because they're just not aware, because they haven't been They may not have a staff person who just knows about that sophisticated area. So,
And
and we shouldn't feel sad about that. It's our job to educate them in that stuff.
And don't you think the advent of social practice also helped, because people started thinking about process and how the arts don't stand alone? Like, it used to just annoy me when people would say, well, is your organization, is it criminal justice? Is it education? Is it community development? And I'd be like, well, like, what? I would be like, what's it to you? No, I didn't say that. I was like, yes, it's all those things. Like, nuance is important. And the arts it's like in the arts world, we embrace the nuance, right? So there are organizations dealing with really critical issues. And so it's like our ability, that goes back to what you were saying about storytelling. How do we get those narratives out there over and over and over again and have a coalition of people pushing? That's key. And I have a question for Patty and Jason.
How can a sector that is that complicated, far-reaching, diverse, and nuanced be serviced by one office?
Right.
One office of arts, culture, and the creative economy. We are impactful enough, we are complicated enough, we have influence enough that we deserve a department, because one office, and that's the way Philadelphia is structured, we have the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. How can something as expansive as arts and culture be serviced by one office? We deserve more. We deserve a department. We deserve a cabinet level leader.
That was going to be my question for you, Patty. How can we help you? What can we do? I'm ready. Call on me. No, seriously, because it's like, this is a big lift.
It's a big lift. It is a lift that requires all of our input. Now, how can we all help? One, we have to consistently speak with one voice. We have to stay unified, leave the pettiness behind. We have been victimized by a political system that encourages us to act individually rather than collectively. So if we keep that in mind, eye on the prize, make sure that we are not fighting amongst one another. That is the number one outward-facing issue that we have. I think other ways that we can help: show up and show out. We are having the mayoral forum on March 30th, but what I understand is that there will be mayoral forums almost every single day between now and the primary. We want to make sure that there's an arts and culture advocate at each one of those things, so that those candidates can't get away with thinking, oh, well, if I go to this forum on March 30th, I'm going to see and hear from the arts and culture community. We want them to see us when they're talking to the African American Chamber. We want them to see us when they're talking to Parks and Recreation. We want them to see us at every single one of these forums. So that's how we can help, by spreading out as we all are working on through this next political season.
I have another idea. You can also go to meet and greets or fundraisers. You don't really have to give much, you know what I mean? Or just go. And then you position yourself right up front. And then you ask a question about cultural policy. That's what I'm doing, just so you know. So, I mean, anybody is you're all welcome to join. But thank you. That's really great. And I know a lot of us feel this way. We want to do everything we can to help.
So, Jason, you have that national perspective. You talked about how things worked in Boston. What are the primary lessons learned there and elsewhere that you think can help us run this race here in Philadelphia?
And is there another city you can cite that we could really learn from besides Boston?
I mean, I think we've talked a lot about the things that have worked. What I would add on top of that is you have advocates in places you don't necessarily know, right? Because there's been so much work done on this in the last few years, where organizations have been we gave grants to the Philadelphia Community Development Corporation organization, which did a bunch of arts work. I mean, that's a ton of organizations working on the ground in Philadelphia that understand us and will stand up with us. I mean, like, collective power is the secret always. And so I don't think it's that, and there might be people that you least suspect, or organizations or groups that you least suspect, that want to help us because they're going to see the mutual benefit of being with us. And that has been very successful in a lot of communities with doing a lot of this work. I mean, we're over that hump that a lot of these organizations understand what we can do for them, right? And so I would encourage that, and I think a lot of that's happened here, and I'm not sure they're actually showing up in our rooms yet, even though we've showed up in their rooms. So how do we invite them back into our rooms?
I think we have to be very purposeful and strategic about that.
Yeah.
We do have allies in adjacent industries.
Yeah.
So you've heard me say this before, that arts and culture is the magnet and the multiplier. You come to the city to go to the Aden Theater. You park. The parking association needs to be a partner of the arts community. You go to the
dry
restaurant.
cleaners. I mean,
You go from the theater to a restaurant. The restaurant and hotel association needs to be a partner. And we need to be very specific and purposeful about engaging them, identifying our overlapping priorities, and enlist their help because they're at the table. They're and recognized as an asset in the city. We want them to partner with us to get our message across.
And I think
there's actually allies in other places. I mean, we've done projects about probation reform, working with different social service agencies. And over again, I've heard, oh, only the arts could do this. Only the arts could bring people together. Only the arts could be so healing. So I actually think across the board that there are allies there that we need to draw on.
And especially a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations. I mean, the culture bearers, I don't know if you know what that term means, basically the people who hold the culture for a culture, they're artists, right? And those are the people that are going to help us get over some of the issues in our country. They have to be at the table as the city deals with those issues. You asked about other places. I mean, I think if you're tracking some of this stuff, there's been a few really big successful ones recently. The biggest one was actually in California, where they just passed $1 billion bill to support arts education in the state. That's a great model. That's a state level one. There was, I believe, in Austin, Texas, just a big effort to do this. I mean, I think it doesn't just have to be taxes. You have to look at the other ways that people are creating support systems, existing money that can be rerouted, bonds, all kinds of things. There's all kinds of sophisticated stuff happening out there. And I think that, it's continuing to happen. There's continuing to be successes in many places. And so I think and you can just call those people and they'll tell you how they did it. I mean, they're all really willing to share.
And also California just passed a bill. They have more money going now to state prisons so that every state prison in the state of California has art. Mm-hmm.
It was a really successful one in Minnesota many years ago where the environmental and the arts, this is a famous one, where the environmental community and the arts community came together and passed permanent funding to support parks, recreation, solving environmental justice issues, and arts all at the same time. I mean, those coalitions matter, right? Yeah. So,
coalitions, this more expanded idea of who an artist is, the idea that's in the language now of culture bearer, is an advocacy tool, and a constituency as well. We're going to open up for questions now, and if you want to, there's a mic in the back, so if you hold up your hand. There's one back here, and then
how are you? Hi, good evening. Thank you for all your passion. I am new to Philly and Pennsylvania. I come from Chicago. I've just been here a year. And I appreciate what you've been saying about coalition building. And just to share a little bit about my experience in Chicago, the art scene is thriving there. And I think one of the reasons it is because there's cooperation between the city government in terms of its cultural council. It's got thriving educational and academic institutions that are producing great young artists. It has a collecting community that supports emerging artists, and it has philanthropy and business that is all working cooperatively together to develop policy and to support the arts. And, as you know, Chicago has its problems, but it is an international destination for arts and culture. And my experience there, being there 10 years, was it's the coalition between all of those entities that support the arts and artists. And it's got a very horizontal culture with regard to artists, unlike New York, which is very elitist and vertical. Chicago is very horizontal, so people mingle. All of those entities mingle. So I don't know, I guess my question is, what's going on in Philly with those kinds of entities? Are they talking to each other? Are they working with each other to build coalition and cooperation among them?
I would say not enough, and it happens in fits and spurts. I remember finding out about how much the Department of Cultural Affairs, I think it is, what their budget is, and I remember thinking, I didn't hear right. Like, this is like so big, like it's just sort of like I couldn't even wrap my head around it. But I think what you just described is what we aspire to. I mean, that we haven't, but see, we have all what you've heard tonight, everybody, is that we have all the ingredients for that to occur. What we need is leadership to help sort of underscore that, right? And I don't think it's just one leader. I know the responsibility. Right. Yeah. Right. Well, I can't explain exactly, but I can just say, as someone who's been here a really long time, that it sort of goes in waves, and sometimes you feel it's gelling more than other times, but it hasn't really held. So that vision that you described sounds like, that to me would be an aspiration that we should have here in Philadelphia. And I think we have the art schools, we have artists, we have extraordinary arts organizations. Like it's all there, but it hasn't connected. And I think what Patty said is, for too long, it's like a scarcity model. Like, it's just, when there's a scarcity model, everyone fixates on the scarcity. And we're often at the precipice looking over and saying, oh my God, how did we get here? And it's like Groundhog Day, because it happens over and over and over again. And so it's like a mindset. And you're right, a leader is not going to solve that. We have to solve that.
There are some deeply embedded traditions here in Philadelphia that need to change. We require structural change. The city of Philadelphia has always depended upon the philanthropic community to support arts and culture. It is not perceived as a city priority. And they've always said, let the private sector take care of arts and culture. That's a conversation that we need to have, and that's a structural challenge that we need to change. So yes, we have opportunity, but we have to make sure that we have these conversations that move us towards structural change. Otherwise, we are going to continue to have these episodic victories, and then we go back.
Question. Do you still have a question? Yeah. And then Ginny.
Thanks. It seems like accountability is a piece of advocacy, right? Or maybe it's the opposite side of the coin, the other side of the coin. So what does accountability look like? I think we all know we have a mayor who promised that he supported arts and culture, right? And so how has he been held accountable? Not too much from what I've seen. So what's our strategy for accountability at the mayoral level, at city council level, at the state level? I feel like we have to have a follow-through plan as well. Does that make sense?
I think, first of all, you document what they said. We all have anecdotal knowledge of, well, he promised this and he promised that. That's why we are putting together the Arts Voters Guide, because we want to publish, and we're doing it in both English and Spanish, exactly what these candidates say, so that when one of them gets elected, we have that list of what they say, and we can have that continuing conversation. We can't rest on our laurels. Advocacy goes on and on and on. So it doesn't end when the election comes about. It does continue, so you do have that conversation of, well, Mr. Mayor, you said this. How are we going to enact that? And again, that's standing in your power. That's understanding that advocacy is ongoing. It doesn't end on election day.
And I want to say, so there, I won't name names, but there was a governor promised support for the Department of Human Services, and the support was cut. And the advocates, I know because we get some DHS funding, so we were enlisted like hundreds and hundreds of other people, held this person accountable. There was a huge letter writing campaign. People went to the press, like repeatedly, right? So there are techniques to hold people accountable. We just haven't done it, but we need to do it. We have to not be so nice next time.
First of all, I have to say everything everybody said about advocacy and arts policy, right on. Number two, Jane, thank you for bringing up that you were a CETA artist. Blaze and I were CETA artists. And I think one of the things we can learn from history, from CETA, which, although it was a federally funded program, was very different from the WPA in that there wasn't a federal arts project, a federal writers project, a federal theater project. It was sort of through the back door that 20,000 art sector jobs were created. And I think we need to keep the advocacy in sort of the bigger picture going on. But I also think we have to look in unlikely places. You know, and Jane, I think you do a lot of that because you're partnering with different organizations. And something you said, Jason, about unlikely allies during CETA, the biggest booster for the arts was Ernie Green, who was the assistant commissioner of labor for the US. And I think we've sort of, as artists, maybe dropped the ball and not looked in unlikely places for money. So if there's, you know, a Build Back Better program and there's money for infrastructure, well, who are going to be the photographers? Who are going to be the videographers? Can we insert ourselves in those areas? So it's not really a question, but it's sort of a challenge that I'm throwing out. How can we insert ourselves in unlikely avenues to find money to hire artists?
Yeah, so I have a lot to say about this.
Yeah. You know, when I remember at one point someone said, "You're looking for money. Have you ever talked to the water department?" I was like, "The water department?" And they were like, "Yes." And we were like, "Okay, water department." And then it was like the airport. I'm like, the airport. So you're right. It's like there are these pockets where there are funds, and how do we uncover it and then really embrace equity and then in an equitable manner make funds available for more people?
So I can speak. We did a lot of this work in the Obama administration, and I can go nerd on about it forever about how we literally created a position at the NEA whose job it was to go and work with all the other agencies. We had no money back then. We did training for all the federal agents. There was this huge effort to train all the federal agencies about how to work better together, and we had all these cultural people in the room, that we had all these individual relationships. At one point, we literally sent one of our employees to just go work at HUD and do cultural stuff at HUD. That is going to continue to happen under this administration. There's that person who actually did that before is still there, and her name's Jen Hughes. She was just put into a senior position at the NEA and is going to be doing a lot of this work. I mean, the five absolutely enormous $1 trillion bills, that money is just beginning to come out. They're just beginning to write the guidelines for that. We're in those rooms. The arts community isn't that, like at the federal. So this is the deal. The federal level, it's going to be coordinated. Opportunities are going to be sent down to the local level, and the communities that are organized at the local level are going to be able to access that money to work in all kinds of interesting ways. But if we don't have our act together locally, it's not going to come to Philly. There's plenty of other cities in the United States that are going to get that money. But so we have to be ready for that, because it's a once every 60-year opportunity.
So this integrated arts plan that we're talking about is one way that we can infiltrate those unlikely places within city government. Having a mayor who understands the expansive reach and opportunity of arts and culture and is directive throughout the departments, so that, as I said, if we have a community revitalization strategy, if we have a workforce development strategy, if we have a public safety strategy, let's look for those opportunities to infiltrate and place artists there.
But I have to say, so I want you to understand this, that if we don't have, I'm going to say, a Department of Arts and Culture, or what we have now, an Office of Arts and Culture, if we're not highly organized, we will miss out on funding opportunities. We will miss out. And they will go to other cities. So that's why, and can I just say this, why it's so important, and this is one thing about Philly that I think we need to hold on to, is that incumbents in Philly don't lose. So I can't explain why, it just seems to be a pattern. But so the next mayor will most likely be here for 8 years. For 8 years. So, while I understand it's not just one leader, this is a really important election.
Yeah, and I'll just say from the federal perspective, we were constantly talking to each other and searching for communities who came to us with ideas. They would come and say, we've all gotten together. We were working across all these agencies. We've got this thing we want to try to do together. And we would work together to find the funding lines and coordinate to make sure that they got the money. And there's so much money right now. I mean, you have to get out of this mindset there's no money at the feds. If we have strong ideas that will help solve some of the problems in Philly, it will happen. But you have to be they're not just going to hand you the check or give you the grant opportunity and say, please apply. You got to be ready. You got to be ready.
The operative word there is together.
Yeah.
I've been in Philadelphia's cultural community for decades and have actually been part of what I've called the crab in the basket syndrome, where, people or organizations claw each other down because they're afraid that if one succeeds, it's going to be to the detriment of the other. Our elected officials have actually used that to our detriment. They have counted on us competing against one another. So this idea of unity, the idea of working together, is central to accomplishing so much of what we've talked about tonight.
Hi, my name's Leslie Grace, and I'm actually an art teacher here in Philadelphia and founder of the Philadelphia Art Teacher Alliance and past president of the Pennsylvania Art Education Association. And coming at you as an art educator here in Philly, where we have about 270-something public school teachers and then additional ones in charter and private schools, I wonder how you guys see the vision for supporting art educators where we are, harnessing the power of our young artists coming to be in the city. How can you support us, and how can we help support a cultural policy in Philadelphia, especially when, there's so much on teachers' plates as it is. We're overworked and overburdened. We're just getting by, scraping our fingernails on the ground, right? So how can there be better supports for us? There's money, I hear. That's great. How can we be helped in getting our hands on that money? Because whenever there's something available for us to apply for, there's so much we have to jump through, so many hoops. And by the time we get to the paperwork, we're like, forget it. So what can be done about that? Teachers are huge in this city.
Teachers are huge in this city, and teachers have huge consequence. I think, and this might sound like a soft solution, but once again, we have to change the narrative. The truth is that a student who is exposed to arts education is 4 times more likely to finish school than one who hasn't. And we can go further. A high school student who is engaged in arts education often scores 92 points higher on their SATs. Now, you say that to a mom or a dad, and all of a sudden they understand the value of arts education. I don't understand why arts education is perceived as a nice to have, but not central. I mean, we don't say that about, let's say, English. You're required to take 4 years of English in high school. Do we expect those kids who take 4 years of English to end up to be novelists? No. But when we talk about arts education, the response is, well, they're not going to be artists, so they don't need arts education. Well, what employers are looking for, the number one thing that business owners and CEOs are looking for, is creative thinking. And what generates creative thinking and problem solving but the arts? We have to put those stats out there. We have to humanize those stats because art does have consequence to the lives of our children. It is not a nice to have. And somehow there is a disconnect between that impact and the perception of people and the perception of sometimes our school board.
And I don't know why it can't be sort of non-negotiable. Like why, like in Portland, Oregon, they have an art tax. It's like $35 a person so that every school has an art teacher, period. And there's a fund so people can apply for the fund for supplies if they have an idea. Like I just, that sort of baffles me. We're in a city where there are a lot of nonprofit arts organizations like Mural Arts. You know, we serve about 2,000 young people working with kids. And lately, over the last few years, what I've noticed is there's been a trend of teachers calling us with ideas that they would like to implement in their school. And so we've been thinking, like, so Mural Arts has limited funding, right? But what we've tried to do is make grants to teachers so they have an idea, like, and then they could bring it to fruition. Because, so I'm like, well, if we could figure this out, like, why can't this be sort of, but you see, it's somebody, the leadership has to say, this is really important, instead of thinking about all the reasons that it can't work. Some years back, we had a contract with a district. It's long gone. It's like existential, the contract circling Earth. So, but it was like, go into schools, that's not a mystery. We'll do public art at 20 schools a year. We'll go in, do 18 weeks of teaching, and we created a Diego Rivera Advanced Institute for Young People in the summer. The district said, oh my God, the teachers are going to be so upset. I'm like, they're going to be really upset that Mural Arts is here? Yeah, they're going to be really upset. And of course, the teachers are like, oh my God, Mural Arts, thanks. We really could use the support. And there's funding. This is fantastic. So I'm like, there are creative models out there that can work. Do we have the will to investigate those models and then implement it? What are the changes that we could bring to the table in the next administration? And we have to ask these hard questions of the district as we ask of leadership in the city of Philadelphia, and we should ask ourselves those questions, because it shouldn't be what the stats that Patty said. We know this stuff, right? So why is it so mysterious that it's not happening? And thank you for the work that you do. It's awesome.
Okay, so I think there's a really obvious question here, which nobody has addressed. All right, so we're going to draw up a set of commitments for the mayoral candidates that they're going to endorse, and we're going to eventually hold them to task for doing this. Who is the we? Okay, who is that organization that is going to get us, the art teachers, the restaurant people, the PMA, the Philadelphia Orchestra? What is the organization that is going to bring us all together and do this? Any suggestions?
Well, I'd like to say that the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance will be and is that organization. The Cultural Alliance is an art service organization comprised of over 430 arts organizations as our members throughout the region. That membership, it goes from the PMA to Mural Arts to Taller Puerto Riqueño. We represent the diversity of the arts community, the cultural community. We're comprised of zoos and historic sites and performing arts, the visual arts, and advocacy is central to the work that we do. That arts rally that was held in May was organized by the Cultural Alliance for Greater Philadelphia. The Mayoral Forum is being organized in partnership with Mural Arts and others by the Cultural Alliance. So the Cultural Alliance is our arts advocacy organization, but we cannot do it alone. We need the partnership of everyone in this room, but we need the active engagement of Mural Arts, and we have that commitment. We need the active engagement of other organizations, and we need financial support to do it. But I'd like to say that the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance, of which I'm president, is that organization.
No, I was just saying, thank you, Patty. Arts activism is civic activism, and I think needs to be approached that way as well. I want to thank all of you. Dan, thanks for bringing us together in conversation. Can we have a hand for all of these ideas? And there are amazing resources out there. So you'll be hearing from all of these people. Patty's going to hold you all accountable.
And I will too, and I'm a pest.
Thank you very much. Thank you.